Today we'll elevation test this generator and see how well it does from all the way to about 600 feet and all the way up here almost to 8,000 feet. But before we get started, we do need to get some baseline numbers to see how well it does, and then we'll head up to elevation to see how much power loss there is. Now, every time you go up in elevation, every 1,000 feet, you are going to lose about 3.5% of power. Even though this unit is fuel injection, it is not forced induction, so it doesn't have a turbo, it doesn't have a supercharger, so it's still going to lose a lot of power, but it should just run ultimately better overall. Okay, so we're going to be hooking this up to my trailer. We're going to keep track of RPMs and more, and along with some data with the Power Watchdog. And it is currently about 615 feet where I live, and the temperature is about almost 90 degrees. Okay, so I'll throw some information up on the screen in a second, but we're going to look at RPM real quick. This is with it in eco mode at 3,500 RPM, and so this is as low as the engine will go. And now if I turn this off, this will boost the engine up to about 4,800. Okay, so we're going to start by turning on my first AC unit. This is a 15K, and it does have a soft start built in, but you can keep track of all the information on the left there with the Power Watchdog and the app from the Honda. And now you can see we're burning about 14 amps. Going to turn on the front AC. This is a 13.5, which I have a little rattle up there from a piece of tape. I was sealing this off, but I got to fix that real quick because it's driving me nuts. Now, with this one having a soft start, it takes a little longer to start, and you can see now we're burning pretty much the max load for this generator. Okay, so this Honda is rated at 2,600 watts or 21.6 amps. And if we turn this on eco mode, I don't think it'll go down anymore. And nope, because it is at max load. So we'll take a look at RPM. And again, max RPM for this generator is 4,800, and we're pretty much there. If I show you just right here on the side, it'll say 4,800 RPM for rated revolutions. Okay, the first of a couple surprises. We're going to bring this as well for reference because it is a carbureted model and it's so popular. Now right now the eco mode is off. You can see 4,000 RPM. And one of the great things about this generator is the low idle, hence it's so quiet. It's one of the lowest idle generators out there. This will drop all the way to 2,800. And even almost at max load, it'll still drop down in RPM. Let's get some loads on this, that way we can get our baseline numbers. And so again, we'll turn on this 15K AC unit, and because it has a soft start, it really does make it easy for this to fire up. But you are almost at max load because this is rated at 1,800 watts. That's what this little one is rated at. So, and away it goes. So right now, just with this AC, it's about 1,600 watts, so you don't have a lot of room to run anything else. And if it was hotter outside, it would actually be closer to 1,700 because heat is going to rob power, and that's almost a max load that you're trying to pull on this generator on a hot day. But we'll take a look at the RPMs and show you how it drops down. Now it looks like it's pulling full RPM at about 4,000. But one thing that is kind of nice, even with this almost being at max load, I can still turn the eco mode on. Check this out. And boom, it drops down, and so it makes it a little bit quieter. And not to mention, this also saves fuel, which a lot of generators are running a much higher RPM now, but that's why this thing is still so popular, because it is really quiet. It does really well, but I just wish it had some extra features. Okay, first elevation spot with the EFI Honda. We are at about almost 3,800 feet. All right, we'll turn off the eco mode and away we go. Okay, so again, we'll start with the main AC unit. Now, some things have changed. Notice the temperature. Now, where I am, I was thinking it was going to be hotter today, but it is not. But that is actually going to make it a lot easier for the generator to run these loads because it's only about 70 right now where I'm at. And if you notice the amount of wattage that's being pulled, you can see there only 1,150. That's not much compared to the 1,600 for that main AC. Now, as we turn on the second one, we were at max load with both of these running. So now as this fires up, which you can see there on the Power Watchdog, both of these are already going, and we're only using now 2,000 watts of power versus before we were about 2,700. Okay, so let's take a look. Now we're at max RPM on this at 4,800. As you can see there, we'll turn on eco, And now look, it drops down versus before it wouldn't. And so that just saved us about 800 RPM almost, and that'll save fuel. But most of the time generators will run just fine from 0 to about 4,000 feet. Now they will do better if you jet them, especially if you live there. That's what I would do, but for short trips they do just fine. Okay, now the little Honda. Now one thing I did do is I got rid of the power watchdog because it can get a little bit finicky with the smaller generators if the voltage drops just a little bit too much and it'll kick off. Okay, so back to the main AC unit. Now remember, this AC unit was using about 1600 watts when we were down at the first test site. And now with this kicking on, and with the temperature being colder, look at that, only about 1250. So it's not using very much. Okay, now I did increase the loads a little bit. Not that it will sustain this, because eventually it will kick off because we are overloading the generator. But at this elevation, it is able to pull max RPM, and eco mode won't make a difference now. But this would be a different test if it was 100 degrees outside and we're at about 4,000 feet. But at a 1600 watt load, it should be able to handle that pretty much no problem. But we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next spot. And on to the next spot, we are now at just over 5,700 feet. And if you're wondering about how well these start, not a problem for the fuel injected model whatsoever. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so I got rid of the power watchdog just because it can get finicky, but we'll be able to still tell a lot of information from our app on the Honda. Now again, with this running, it should draw about 1250 watts. Not really a problem so far with the Honda. Now you got to remember, our loads are different. We're trying to pull a much higher and harder load using these AC units. This is more of an inductive load, so running motors or compressors, that's a lot harder than say running like a hair dryer, or if you're running a hot plate, or even just like the electric water heater in this. But now with both of these up and running, and there we go, so about 2,000 watts almost. Now to me it does sound a little bit different. It may not to you just from the video camera and also the microphone, but still able to pull pretty much max RPM. So we're gonna turn the eco on, see what it does. And so as this does drop down, it definitely doesn't sound as healthy. It's actually kind of going up and down a little bit, but we're gonna see if we can pull max power. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm increasing the load, which I'm trying to charge up a battery bank to try to get to 2,600 watts on this generator. And it is struggling a little bit to try to get up there and maintain it. And especially with that eco on, it didn't like that at all. And now it's doing much better, obviously, with the eco off. And it seems to still struggle a little bit. I'm trying to go over 2,600, but it definitely doesn't like it. It'll do it just for a second, but at the moment, this is about what I can get, about 24 to 2,500. But I did want to show you the voltage. Even at pretty much max load and it's kind of struggling, voltage still looks good. Okay, let's see how it does. And back with the main AC unit. Again, it does have a soft start, 15K. And away we go. Should pop off, there it goes. So about 1,200 watts is what this should use. And honestly, so far this generator is doing pretty good, even at almost 6,000 feet. But we'll increase the load a little bit. We'll turn on this down here. So this is the converter. That's what that breaker is there. And I do have a jumper in place, plus there is the boost button, so that'll increase the voltage a little bit, but the batteries are pretty charged. So, well, 150 watts. Okay, we'll take a quick look at the generator, and so far to me, I can tell it's working a little bit harder, but it's still hitting max RPM. Turn this down. And yeah, so far it still drops, but it's definitely having to work more, obviously, now that we're almost at 6,000 feet, but We're gonna go ahead and increase the load up to about max. Okay, so now you can see I'm pulling 1840 watts, and it didn't really have a problem going up to that, which pretty impressive. Now, this isn't the right thing to do at all, but I'm surprised it's actually able to do it pretty easy. So overall, it is struggling a little bit to run this, and it's not going to stay on very long. I'm sure it'll shut off in about 5 minutes, maybe 10, but still getting max RPM, so we'll check the voltage. And when taking a look at the voltage, it still looks great. That is one thing I do like about this unit versus the older 2000 unit. It did have some voltage drop issues. This thing is kind of a beast when it comes to holding voltage. And now, a long way from home, we've reached our final destination. This spot here is about 7,700 feet exactly. So we'll see how well these generators do, and I have a couple of surprises for you along the way. Now, one thing I've noticed anytime I start this generator, it starts easily, always with the first pull. So this EFI is definitely nice, and at $3,000 it better be. Okay, so now back to the main AC unit. Again, this shouldn't be too much of a problem because it is cold out. And as we wait for it to fire up all the way, you can hear it out there, the way it goes. So not really too much of a problem. We'll go up here to the front AC unit now, fire this up, and see how this does. So far I don't really hear too much of an issue. And should kick on here in a second, but with the second AC, there it goes. A little bit of a rev. Now I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can hear some fluctuations in the fan, which means the generator is either struggling voltage-wise or that the generator itself, as you can see the RPM kind of going back and forth, or the wattage. Now here it sounds fine, doesn't seem to be doing too bad, and still getting pretty much max RPM out of it, 4780, so 4800 is max. Drop this down. Oh yeah, and that's not good. You can see how it's hunting up and down to try to maintain those loads. Now, if it was hotter out at this elevation, it would definitely be struggling. But again, with this lower RPM, it's not really able to maintain these type of loads, as the engine kind of wants to hunt up and down a little bit. So we're going to turn this off. And I'm actually going to switch up the loads just a little bit because I want to pull max load out of this to see if I can. And that way it doesn't go up and down, but turn this off. And now it's doing much better. So I'm going to go switch some stuff up and we'll see if we can get max. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the AC now. Now, being that's an inductive load, it's harder to run. We're going to turn on something else. And again, I do have a battery bank that's charging about 600 watts right now, but let me turn on something else. We'll turn on the electric heater. This is more of a resistive load. These are a lot easier to run, like a kettle, this electric heater for the water heater. And if I was gonna run maybe even a coffee pot, that's a lot easier to run. And now I'm gonna try to charge my battery bank up a little bit higher. So I'll turn this on. Now this should be overloading pretty much the generator. I should be at about 2800 watts right now. But it looks like this is pretty much what we're going to get out of it, is about 2400, and not a whole lot more. I did play with this earlier down at the other spot where we first started, and I was able to max out everything. But yeah, this looks like about it. Now, overall, I think this generator has done really good, especially if you're not trying to overload it like I'm doing. I'm obviously putting it through some paces. If you're just using it regular, I think it does just fine. So I'm curious as to what you guys think on that, but I do have a surprise. Now, I did manage to bring these two along. Now, this is one surprise. I have one more after this, but this is a lot cheaper option because you can buy these on the open market for only about $800 each, maybe $900 or $1,000 for the companion because it's a little harder to find. But plus a parallel box, this is way cheaper than the EFI unit. And two engines, in my experience, have always performed better at altitude. So we'll just see how they do, even though they're carbureted units. We're going to go ahead and turn these off of Eco and turn off this other one. Okay, so let's see how it does with the basic test of starting up the AC unit. Now again, with 2 engines, it should do good. And you're gonna wanna watch the power watchdog because the app that you see is only half. It's 1 engine, so it's not getting total because each one is sharing a load, so they only have to do half the work. So right now, instead of 550 watts, it should be about 1100 watts total. And now with that one going, again, we should be close to 2000 watts, which we are. So that app is showing 1050. I'm going to switch it to amps now. That way you can see each one of these generators can pull about 15 amps. And we're going to go ahead and turn on that electric water heater and drop the main AC unit because this is going to have issues. And definitely doesn't like doing it. So you can see right there, when you switch to an inductive load, sometimes that's a lot harder. Now that was 2 AC units and the electric water heater, so if we'll dump the AC unit and just leave the water heater on and the front AC unit, we're now running 2300 watts. That's what the EFI was doing. It was about 2300. Still hitting max RPM out of this one, so both of them should be doing exactly the same. I mean, overall, this is pretty good for a couple of carbureted units, but that's not going to be exactly what you want to do. So in these situations, you would run it with the eco off, but still doing pretty well. 3250, not really having a problem maintaining that. Turn this back on. Now overall, I mean, if you're going to look at this type of an option, this is a lot cheaper, and these have done surprisingly well all the way through. Now again, you are going to foul plugs quicker. You're going to have a lot more carbon buildup on the top of your piston and the valves because they're not jetted properly and they're running rich. And if this was hotter out, these would struggle a lot more. All of them would. It just doesn't matter because heat robs power. But I did want to show you one other option that I brought along as well. Now, if you've never seen this before, this is GenMax's new electronic fuel injection unit. It's not even available to market, as this one is actually a prototype and they're still developing it. And the new one is actually quite a bit different from this one. So this one is actually already obsolete. Now, this is going to be a 4500 watt start and 3600 watt running on it. Now, being a prototype, this isn't even a finished product. They didn't even do the mapping on it for the fuel injection, really. They kind of threw it together and said, here, play with it, test it, give us some feedback. Even has a remote, which I've never even used, so we'll see if it actually works. And there it goes. What do you know? So I'm curious as to see how well this would do. It might completely bomb, or it might do okay. I've played with it at home for about 2 or 3 hours, just running some loads, and it seems to do fine there, but I've never really tested it anywhere else because the new one is not even the same, so I decided to stop. Now, this does have a main on-off switch. It turns on the fuel pump, and it does have low idle, and hopefully you can see this screen, but sometimes the camera frame rate will really mess that up. But just to show you the RPM, it's about 3800 running with the eco off. And so we'll throw some loads at it and just see how well it does overall. Okay, so since it doesn't have any kind of data information to give us, I'll just stick the camera out here, but there goes the AC. Well, and away it goes. So not too bad. Seems to be running fine to me, so we'll just let that kind of run. Let's go over here and take a look real quick. And should be around 1200 watts. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but it says 1.2 kilowatts, so about 1200 watts or so. It would be nice to have some Bluetooth information, but that's typically just going to add more cost and maybe a little more weight. Okay, so I turned the AC unit off now, and again, here's the electric water heater, so 1600 watts, give or take. A little jolt. Okay, so don't know if you can see that, but 1.7 kilowatts, so around 1700 watts, give or take. So far doing pretty good at this load. We're gonna go ahead and add more. Okay, so I increased the power to about 2150 watts, and so far it's doing really good right here. Okay, so I tried to run 2500 watts and it wouldn't do it, so I'm just a little over 2300 right now, about 2350 almost. And so far, this is about what I can get out of it. Pretty much like the Honda, that was the most we could get. And overall, this is actually doing much better than I thought. Even though the fuel mapping isn't exactly 100% correct, it still did pretty good. But let me know which one you guys would like down in the comments below. I hope you liked the video, and I hope to see you next time.